Indonesia can't escape from poverty. Indonesia is too big. Regional inequalities, a tale of two Indonesia. Indonesia is a vast archipelago with over 17,000 islands stretching across Southeast Asia. This diversity is a source of pride, but it's also one of the country's greatest economic challenges. While major hubs like Jakarta and Surabaya thrive, much of the nation is left behind, trapped in cycles of poverty and underdevelopment. It's a stark tale of two Indonesia, one prospering, the other struggling to survive. Let's start with the numbers. Java, home to over half of Indonesia's population, accounts for nearly 60% of the nation's GDP. Jakarta alone contributes 17% of the GDP. Meanwhile, provinces like Papua and Maluku barely register, their economies contributing less than 2% combined. These disparities are staggering and highlight how uneven development has left entire regions out of Indonesia's growth story. In rural areas, basic infrastructure is still a luxury. Roads are often unpaved, making transportation of goods and people costly and time-consuming. In Papua, for instance, villagers often have to trek for hours just to access a market or healthcare facility. Lack of reliable electricity and internet further isolates these regions, cutting them off from modern economic opportunities. Agriculture remains the backbone of rural economies, employing millions but contributing less than 14% to GDP. Small-scale farmers often lack access to markets, credit, and modern technology, leaving them vulnerable to fluctuating prices and climate change. Contrast this with urban centers where high-rise buildings, bustling malls, and thriving businesses paint a picture of prosperity. The gap is undeniable. This regional inequality isn't just economic, it's also social. In rural areas, access to quality education and healthcare is limited. Schools are often underfunded, with poorly trained teachers and inadequate facilities. Healthcare clinics are scarce, and many Indonesians in remote areas must travel to cities for even basic medical care. These disparities perpetuate poverty, as children in rural areas grow up without the same opportunities as their urban counterparts. The government has tried to address these inequalities through initiatives like the Village Fund, Dana Desa, which allocates billions of rupiah annually for rural development. But corruption and mismanagement have plagued these efforts. Funds intended for roads, schools, and healthcare often end up lining the pockets of local officials. The result? Limited impact on the ground and growing frustration among rural communities. Even the ambitious relocation of Indonesia's capital to East Kalimantan is fraught with challenges. While it promises to bring development to a lesser-known region, critics argue it risks becoming a symbol of inequality, benefiting only the elite while draining resources that could be used to uplift struggling provinces. The private sector has also been hesitant to invest in rural areas. High logistical costs and lack of infrastructure make these regions less attractive for businesses. This leaves rural communities reliant on government aid, creating a cycle of dependency that's hard to break. So, what does this mean for Indonesia's future? Regional inequality isn't just a local issue. It holds back the entire nation. A country cannot thrive when half its population is left behind. Bridging this gap will require massive investments in infrastructure, education, and healthcare, coupled with policies that ensure fair distribution of resources. Indonesia's potential is undeniable, but to unlock it, the nation must find a way to bring all its regions along on the journey to prosperity. As we move to the next context, we'll examine how corruption and governance issues further complicate these efforts.